A killer who is only 11 years old, but in the eyes of the law, she's just a child? Hello, welcome to another episode of Criminal Patrol. Of course, today we had a completely different episode prepared, some old case, but a very interesting one. However, life surprises us again, probably just like many of you. It's hard not to mention it, not to talk about what happened yesterday in Jelenia Gora, because I think this case shocked us. It's another kind of threshold that we've crossed, although as you'll see in this episode, the symptoms of all this have actually been appearing for a few years now. For me, there's nothing extraordinary about it except that it's the tragic death of an 11-year-old girl, and the killer is a girl, just a year older, 12 years old. Just like today, all day long everyone is saying that a child killed a child, and it's just something none of us can wrap our heads around. Of course, we can't talk about everything today, and not everything is clear yet. For the most part, yes, but this case is only a few hours old. Yesterday, at exactly 2:46 post-meridium, the first such report was made to the police in Jelenia Gora. Someone calls saying that near Wyspianskiego Street, near school number 10, which is an elementary school, there's a body lying there. It looked like it was the body of someone young, almost a child. The police got there in just a few minutes, and unfortunately it turned out to be true. They found the body of an 11-year-old girl, a student from a nearby school. That's school number 10, an elementary school in Jelenia, and she was a student there. She was found in a small park about 200 meters from the school. There's a green area there with a stream or a small river flowing through it. It's also a place where students from that school often come to talk and spend time together. It's also away from the school windows and the eyes of the teachers. So it's no surprise that students show up there, and usually there are quite a few of them. These are afternoon hours, and around 2:30 post-meridium, quite a few students are already leaving school. The police arrive at the scene, they find a body, and the investigator immediately realizes that everything looks like a murder. The girl has injuries on her body. These injuries indicate that someone struck her. The autopsy will be conducted today. We don't have the autopsy results yet, but it looks like there were at least several blows. They also immediately find a knife at the scene. It's a kind of scout knife, let's say, a knife that's often used for camping. This knife was lying there covered in blood. It looked like it was the murder weapon. The search began. The area was remote, not far from the school. As I said, you're about 200 meters away. There are houses there, a lot of people, so the police didn't have any problems figuring out what was going on there. The initial information indicated that there was some kind of conflict between two girls, both students of that school. The first information, around 7 post-meridium yesterday, was that the girl who died was 12 years old. However, the one who killed, because that's how it should be described, the one who used the knife, killed, was or was supposed to be 14 years old. It's hard to say because it's even more shocking, but I don't know if that's really the right word, because it turned out that the one who died was only 11 years old, and the one who killed was a year older, is a year older. She's only 12 years old. Well, we know that the girls went to the same school. They were students at the same school. Only the older one was a year ahead. They supposedly didn't know each other, but that's just in theory. because it looks like they met there on purpose, that they had something to clear up, and during all of this, a murder occurred. This motive is, at the moment, I would say unknown. The investigators don't want to say. It's a delicate matter. But naturally, it seemed that they really weren't friends. That's a big word. They weren't even acquaintances. But they must have known each other by sight, and there must have been something between them, because it looks like they just met there. At this place, the girl, the older one, was stopped. That's the 12-year-old. All decisions at this point will be made by the court. That's the family and juvenile court. So here neither the police nor the prosecutor's office makes any decisions because this case concerns a child. The killer, who is only 11 years old, but in the eyes of the law, that's a child. What about the one who is the perpetrator and is only 12 years old in this situation? I think the Polish Penal Code did not foresee such a situation, just as we as a society are not prepared for this kind of situation. We simply can't wrap our heads around the idea that a child of that age could kill. Me neither. I think the law isn't prepared for this either. Because someone who is under 13 years old, who hasn't turned 13 yet, isn't criminally responsible. So this girl, who is the perpetrator, won't be held criminally responsible. Therefore, none of the criminal code regulations apply. Not even those that apply to children who have already turned 13. Well, in fact, the only and most serious measure that can be applied is placing the person in an educational center, and in that educational center, indeed that girl can be placed in such an educational center. A child who has turned 10 can be placed there, but in the criminal sense, or according to criminal law, she is not held responsible for having killed. It can't even be a correctional facility, because a correctional facility is used for those who are over 13 but under 17. I think this case surprised us in some way, also because we see that the age range of perpetrators of the most serious crimes keeps getting lower. We already had a situation like this in Poland, where several years ago we came to the conclusion that even 15-year-old children can be murderers. Back then, at that time, points were added to the penal code stating that for certain crimes, including crimes under adult conditions, someone who is 15 years old can be held responsible. But I don't think anyone expected that everything would shift and that the perpetrator of a murder could actually be a child as young as 12 years old. Yesterday, the president of Jelenia Góra set up a crisis team. A crisis team consists of people from various institutions whose task is to solve the problem. Usually such crisis teams are formed when there is some kind of disaster, like a flood, a fire, or an epidemiological threat. Well, in this case, the president stated that a crisis team needs to be formed because this is an extraordinary situation. And I think that's the right thing to do. First of all, because just as we are somehow shocked, the students of this school are definitely shocked, the teachers are shocked, and the residents of Jelenia Góra are shocked. Since this morning, psychologists have been working at this school. All the lessons actually started with psychologists talking to journalists, children, and the teaching staff. They tried to explain the situation in some way, but explaining this is really extremely difficult. These psychologists will certainly be available for a longer period of time. I know that there are supposed to be some shifts there, even during the holiday period. As for that girl, the one who passed away, the teenager, she was a girl. From what the principal said, from what the students say, she was an exemplary student, one of those who stood out at school with really very good academic results, but also a girl who was involved. Whenever there was some event, when someone needed help, for example, a student or any kind of charity event, she would volunteer and take part as a volunteer in these activities, participate in various competitions, in sports events. Indeed, she was a girl who took her studies at school seriously. As for the other girl, we don't know, but even if we did, it's hard to say anything here because it seems like this is a huge tragedy. Above all, it's a tragedy for the child who is no longer alive, for her parents, her whole family, and probably also, I think, for the family of the one who killed. It must be a shock because it's hard to imagine that the parents could have expected something like this to happen. There is talk today about various motives. I don't want to discuss them. They've come up today. The prosecutor's office has not confirmed them so far, but it seems to me that in this situation these motives simply aren't important because what motive could there be for killing a colleague? Well, we all know, looking at it from an adult's point of view, that at that age, when you're 11 or 12 years old, a pimple on your nose is a problem. A critical remark from a peer is a problem. We know later that it doesn't matter at all, but at the time it's a problem. And it seems that this is exactly the kind of problem the one who killed had. In her opinion, it was a problem. Why do they think like children but solve situations like adults? I also have such an association, even from the last few days. We had a story in Swopsk where a roommate killed his friend, and we also can't really give the motives. A few days ago, we had a similar story in Michlenis when a 23-year-old guy attacked a police officer with a knife and was shot. We can't explain these things, why they do it, what the motives are, because from a logical point of view, it seems that there just aren't any rational motives, that it simply can't be explained. When I talked about this topic, I said that so far in criminology, there have been 7 such questions, including, among others, the answer to the question of what the motives were. Usually these motives in some way explain things and were rational. For example, someone wants to get rich, someone wants revenge, various reasons like that. Today, I would say that another motive is emerging, an irrational one, inexplicable, and in human terms, grasping it is simply impossible. I think we have a problem. We have a problem with the psychological resilience of children. Why is this a problem? Well, that's more a question for sociologists, psychiatrists, and psychologists. However, this is nothing new. I, who observe what's happening, these criminal events in recent years, well, we've had several similar situations. For example, in Krakow, when a 13-year-old girl brought a knife to school and attacked her classmate. We had a case in Zielona Góra, when a 16-year-old girl attacked students at her school, her classmates. In 2023 in Kadzidło, a story like this, where a boy, although 18 years old, came to school, left for a moment supposedly to go to the bathroom, and when he returned, he had a knife in his hand and attacked his classmates. So you can see from this that there are quite a lot of these stories. The age keeps getting lower, and there's also a story from Krakow, I would say, from a few months ago. A little boy, just 10 years old, brought a sort of homemade bomb to school. He stuffed papers into a plastic bottle, went to the bathroom, put the bottle with the papers under the ping pong table and set it on fire. He was hoping that the school would just burn down, so they evacuated, but fortunately a teacher reacted. Luckily, they realized in time and evacuated nearly 500 people from the school. But where did a 10-year-old get the idea to solve a problem or get revenge in this way? I think a lot of these things are simply a child's way of thinking. looking for the simplest solutions. For example, like in various kinds of games, which in my opinion are destructive for young people, and kids play these games all the time. Examples from adults keep coming in because without contact we can talk about many things like this. It's a problem that affects not only Polish children or Polish society, I think. I think they were probably the first to notice it. The English even talk about a surge of knife attackers in their country. Children at the age of 10, 11, 13, there's even a movie about it now, are going through puberty. This series is shown from the perspective of a 13-year-old boy, or rather his parents, who killed his female friend. I would say it's a terrifying movie because it also shows what goes on in the mind of such a child. You can also find answers to many questions. I would say it's not really anything new because after all it's also history. For example, Mary Bell was an 11-year-old girl from Great Britain who was 11 years old. A serial killer, she killed 2 children, and she probably would have kept killing. No one expected that such a child could be a serial killer. So there is something to it as well. In these various examples, in these cases, we can't find a motive, just like in the case of Mary Bell. Well, no one ever determined why she wanted to kill. It's probably some kind of child's logic, but we just have to appreciate it and realize that children think this way. And more often they think like children, but more and more often they react like adults. This dramatic story from Jelenia Gora is currently being clarified simply by talking to the girl. Her interview, probably in the presence of a psychologist, will likely take place today. She will certainly say something. Maybe she'll talk about her motives, but not necessarily. She might lie. She might not tell the truth. I would say that these motives are not important. We will all try. I think we all feel safe when we encounter such very real motives and we can't find them. We feel somehow uneasy, shocked because we can't explain something. That always causes anxiety. If we find out about these motives, even if we do, should that somehow calm us down? It doesn't change the fact that a child killed a child. And that's really the problem, because as we can see from what I said, this isn't an isolated case. This one ended in such a dramatic way, but I think there are many more such cases all over Poland. And of course, the question here is how to make it so that children remain children. And that's all for today, I would say, just off the cuff. We didn't want to just ignore such a difficult topic, a topic that shocks all of us. We also don't want it to be left aside somewhere, and in a week or two we'll forget about it and just go back to our everyday lives. In today's episode, of course, subscribe to our channel, and as always, take care.